There are at least 3 different scenarios in which I frequently observe people giving into that temptation to put things into words in order to make that situation better. And they are, at a glance: number 1, compensating for something that they know isn't true; number 2, trying to alleviate some kind of awkwardness or tension; and number 3, clarifying some kind of uncertainty. But as you might have guessed, I want to speak out against that. I firmly believe that sometimes some things are better left unsaid. So let's take a look at each of these scenarios, why that's the wrong approach to take, and what you should be doing instead. Now, in scenario number 1, which is compensating for something that isn't necessarily true, usually I see that transpiring when someone's in a leadership position. They want to get up in front of the crowd and get up on a soapbox when they first get there and start talking about all these great leadership philosophies they have just to win the crowd over. I've also seen it transpire to a lesser extent in one-on-one interactions when people are qualifying themselves, like, yeah, I'm a great friend, I'm really loyal, or I don't care about what anybody else thinks, or whatever, to make themselves look good in that moment. And the problem here is pretty obvious, and that is that, like I said, you're compensating for something you know isn't true. I think the subconscious knowledge of having big shoes to fill, but knowing that you can't fill them, pushes people to start talking themselves up. And eventually, when those actions turn out to not be true, you've lost a lot of trust from those people that you gave that speech or that diatribe to. Not only that, it's a pretty weak form of manipulation. It's very easy to see through. I can tell, just like anybody else, when someone is talking themselves up, that it's really just because they know that they don't actually have those redeeming traits. So the solution here really is to make your actions speak louder than your words. So if you really want to be a good leader, then don't give a speech. Instead, prove with your actions over time that you are that great leader. Same thing with being a good friend. Now, in scenario 2, sometimes when there's a little bit of tension and awkwardness in the air, a very common de-escalation technique that people will use because they don't want to deal with that tension is by putting it into words, turning it into a joke or something like, oh, look at how awkward this is, ha ha ha. And it does work, so it's not necessarily an approach you need to dismiss entirely. It's just not something that you need to do every single time. Because if you do, then you're creating a problem that's twofold. For one, sometimes acknowledging things makes them more awkward than they need to be. Whereas if you just let them glaze over, then it would be fine if you just gave it a little bit of time. And the second problem is that you're not showing that you have courage, maturity, or experience to deal with tension and awkwardness. That's stuff that does come with time, and it can be very attractive when something awkward happens and somebody just is okay with it and silent about it. So for example, I was on a date with a girl a few years ago, and this might get a little racy, so turn your AC on if you have it. But so we went to a movie theater, and as we were sitting down, I lifted the armrest between us because I didn't want there to be a physical barrier there. And we had been getting a little physically intimate with each other up until that point, so it wasn't anything that new. And in a way, it was kind of a test that I was administering. I wanted to see if she could deal with the tension that I just introduced. And if she had just been silent about it, she would have passed that test. But she didn't, because she put it into words. She acknowledged it. She was like, oh, I see what you did there. I know how this is going to turn out. Ha ha ha. Uh-oh. And I was very disappointed as a result. So the solution here is sometimes it's okay to be silent, to let that tension and awkwardness just resolve itself, and to say, or to show rather, that you do have those redeeming traits about you. And finally, scenario 3 is where you are clarifying uncertainty. So if ever you're afraid of that unknown, then you might find yourself asking permission to do things, or just generally asking too many questions. And so what problem does this create? It shows that you are uncertain, which is unattractive in and of itself, but also that you lack confidence to kind of dive into that unknown, and that you lack initiative. You want the other person to basically take the initiative and do all that work for you. And that's not a fun person to be around. So, for example, I'm not a dating advice guru or anything like that, but I do have a little bit of experience in that area, and romantic contexts are one of those contexts where I see this most frequently recurring, where a guy is trying to win over a girl and his uncertainty gets in the way. So I had a friend who went out on a date earlier this year, and they went out to dinner, and there was a point at the end of dinner where it was time to transition to another venue. And instead of him saying something like, hey, you know, I know this great dessert bar where we can go after this, and why don't we head over there now? I think you'd really like it. Instead, he said something along the lines of, so what do you want to do next? Do you want to go there? We can stay here. I'm okay with either one. So it's up to you. You tell me what you want to do. And so what's he communicating? That he wants the girl to be the leader of that interaction, which is not very attractive. And also that he is uncertain. He's afraid of her rejecting him, turning him down, saying, no, I don't want to go there. I would rather stay here, or something like that. And so what is the solution here? For one, take those risks. Show that you're unafraid, that you're willing to deal with that failure if it happens, because even if it does, then you just brush it off. You can just say something like, oh, that was my bad, and let's just move on and do something else, right? But also take that initiative. Don't expect the other person to do all that work for you, and go with the flow. That's just so much more fun. So these scenarios might seem a little narrow in their application, but they are relevant to other scenarios you might find yourself in. So really the point is, if ever you find yourself feeling a little uncomfortable, don't feel or rather don't jump to the immediate approach of just putting things into words and articulating them or asking too many questions, because sometimes you are going to do a lot more harm than good. So hope this makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I'll see you around.